When you imagine something different for yourself, something better and more beautiful than your present circumstances, you are inevitably going to experience frustration. Now, what do I mean? Well, reality, the world out here, is not immediately forthcoming in the provision of your desired state. And what that means is that reality, the world out here, is inevitably going to frustrate you. There's going to be some lag between what we could consider the internal psychic reality and the external consensual reality, uh, which is to say that the world out here is not, again, just going to snap its fingers and immediately provide you with the satisfaction of your desires. Now, that's going to apply whether you are looking for a more satisfying and a more sustainable way of performing your work in the world, running your business. That's going to apply whether you're considering a more harmonious, more mutually fulfilling relationship with your beloved, with your children, with your friends, again, whatever the case is. To the extent that there is a lag in external reality representing your desired internal reality, there's going to be frustration. And boy, this is one of the most important and least understood ideas out there. I find this has tremendous influence both in the world of goal achievement and in the call it the softer world of manifestation, let's say. This is something that is very poorly understood. But when you do understand how to make use of frustration and harness it and channel it toward the fulfillment of your desires, the engine gets revved up very quickly. Now, let's dive in. To the extent that there is a difference between your psychic reality, your internal desired state, and the external world, there's going to be frustration, which is to say, there's something you want that is not immediately forthcoming. That is the definition of frustration. There is a wish that is frustrated by present circumstances. Now, a lot of people will defend against the experience of frustration, and they'll do so for a very specific reason. They fail to distinguish between frustration, irritability, anger, and all of the intensifications of anger, all the way up to murderous rage, let's say. Psychologically, they fail to make these distinctions, and this is an unconscious process. Now, what this means is that when they experience frustration, it's often defended against as if it were murderous rage. And this is, generally speaking, for the protection of some beloved other in their lives. If this sounds hyperbolic, I get it. It sounds crazy to consider that frustration is in any way related to something like murderous rage. But in terms of unconscious processes, I'm willing to bet that you too may also fail to distinguish between these. And I introduce murderous rage as a hyperbolic example, if for no other reason than to say what you are experiencing in your everyday frustration is likely not anywhere near the intensity or the severity of that. But I introduce it as a possibility because it is in your psychic repertoire. You are subject to that immensity and that intensity of feeling. Now, if you confuse something like murderous rage with frustration, just everyday frustration, irritability, anger, if you confuse these things, you will treat any and all of them as if they were the worst possible thing, and you'll defend against that. Now, how might you do so? Well, one of the most common ways to defend against an emotional experience is to bind it with tension. Generally speaking, we can consider somatic tension as something like a straitjacket over an emotional experience. And you can check in with this for yourself. When you imagine a frustrating set of circumstances in your life currently, don't you just immediately tense up a little bit? doesn't it get a little harder to breathe, to get that full, deep abdominal breath? Don't you just get constricted in some way? If that's the case for you, you are subject to an unconscious defense against frustration. Funny. Now, frustration in and of itself is actually a kind of pleasant state of arousal. It's like a potential energy that builds. The the image that I often will share with clients, and some of you will get this reference, some of you won't. But if you think back to like the old school Dragon Ball Z cartoons, they power up and they reach this next level of capability. What do they become? Super Saiyans, I guess. They charge up, and when they charge up to a great enough intensity, they reach some new form with some new powers, some new abilities. I'll suggest that something similar occurs within you, but only if you can actually contain the experience of frustration without constricting. Only if you can hold the charge of that potential energy without squashing it or discharging that energy before it's reached the necessary peak to unlock that new level of potential. So frustration itself is merely potential energy. It builds up this state of this fizzy quality, this arousal of one's biological resources. And when we can contain the potential energy of frustration without binding it in tension, without shutting ourselves down into some depressive heap, or without lashing out in some irritability, some venting our spleens as we so often do, only then can we make use of that energy. And this, again, is such a tremendous resource for us that is so poorly understood, so often neglected, so often squandered. And no wonder then people fail to fulfill on the achievement of their goals. No wonder so many people fail to manifest the life they desire for themselves because they're taking all of this psychic energy available and they bind it, they shut down, they lash out. They're unable to reach the threshold of energetic buildup within themselves that would open up a new world of possibilities. So I hope that makes sense thus far. Again, the reason why this occurs is that unconsciously, frustration is treated as the same as irritability, as the same as anger, as the same as murderous rage. Now, again, that may sound dramatic, but in the background, it's all too common. So I introduce this as a spectrum of, we'll say, generally negative feeling. There's a whole spectrum. And if you're unable to tell the difference between murderous rage, anger, irritability, frustration, if you can't tell the difference, then all of those could be seen as a threat. And let's say you're frustrated by your beloved. You have an argument, they say something that you don't quite like, and you're like, that got under my skin. If you're unable to consciously distinguish between all of these things, well, then, of course, to protect them, you're going to constrict, shut down, whatever the case is. Because, well, constricting or shutting down, that's better than flying off the handle, yeah? So that's some of the unconscious rationale for how this comes to be. Let's talk about how you can more consciously make use of frustration. When you notice that there's something getting into your skin, you're frustrated by some set of circumstances, orient yourself toward what it is that you desire that has been frustrated. Let's say that it's not exactly you that's frustrated. There is some wish to be fulfilled that has been frustrated. So if there's frustration arising in your romantic relationship. Maybe the thing that you desire is a harmonious connection. Maybe that has been frustrated. Maybe it's actually something like, well, a sense of respect that has been frustrated. If there's something you desire in your business, let's say, there's a goal that you have set, a certain revenue goal in your business, a certain way of working, whatever the case is, what do you imagine as being frustrated? Again, what is the desired state? That is the thing that has been frustrated. So you orient yourself toward the positive outcome, the thing you desire, whatever it is that you want. Now, also imagine what it would be like. Imagine some scene that presents the fulfillment of that wish, the achievement of that desire. So I'll give you an example. I was talking with a friend of mine recently, one of my best friends, and he's frustrated by this ongoing tension with this woman he's been involved with for the last year and a half. And I asked him, well, man, the reason you're confused as to what to do is because you don't know what you want, it seems. So you're asking me what you should do, and I'm telling you, well, you should probably ask your vision of desire what to do, not me. 'Cause I don't know how to live your life, but the desire that you have for this relationship, that is going to tell you what to do. That's going to lay out a path toward its fulfillment. He said, well, what I want is a relationship with her that works. Well, okay, great. So, what do you imagine? What's a scene that represents a relationship with her that works? And there was some scene that came to mind of the two of them in the kitchen cooking a meal, laughing together, making some jokes. It was a very tangible scene that represented the fulfillment of this wish, a relationship with her that works. Okay, so here's what you do then. When you're having these conversations with her, or whatever the case is, when you're frustrated by present circumstances in the fulfillment of this wish, what you do is you notice that buildup of energy and you create some space between you and the tension that comes in to constrict this. So, to the extent it's available to you, relax the tension. And if it's difficult to relax the tension, you might then try breathing in and imagining that tension getting pushed out a centimeter away from you. And then you breathe out. And then you breathe in and you imagine that tension getting pushed out yet another centimeter away from you. So you clear some space between you and that tension. And you can allow yourself to fill up with the feeling of frustration, to let that potential energy build in you. And then when you can contain that energy without constricting it, without collapsing it, without discharging it, lashing out in some way, when you can contain the buildup of that energy, you'll notice this, frankly, a kind of pleasant fizzing quality in you. Well, then you imagine the thing that you desire. And taking all of this energy that you've built up in yourself, you invest that energy in the image of what you desire. And as you do so, you'll notice more and more particular details of that image. So in my friend's case, let's say, the scene at the surface level, the first pass was, well, we're in the kitchen cooking together and we're laughing. And so noticing that scene with this buildup of energy, it might be, well, are there other particular details to that image? What, for example, are the two of you cooking? Are you cooking brunch, lunch, dinner? What time of day is it? What specific meal are you cooking? You're laughing about something. What's the something that you're laughing about? Again, there are so many details available in our images that we often miss when we don't have access to the full potential of our energy, our full energetic capacity can reveal to us through the investment of this energy in the image, it can reveal more and more of the particulars of the image. And the reason why we might want that is that all of the particulars of the image offer us inroads to it. They set a kind of, well, they set a set of parameters for the fulfillment of the image, which is to say that as we become more and more invested in the image, it reveals more and more details, and that shows us more and more of what it takes to fulfill that image. Another client of mine, we were working with this process recently, and she was describing that there was some sense of security that she wanted in a relationship. And I asked her, what scene would exemplify that you found this secure companionship, let's say. It was companionship, that was the word. And she immediately had this scene present itself to her, that she's walking with this man, hand in hand, along this path, and we could then work with fleshing out more and more of the image, giving it body, giving it, again, flesh. When we flesh out the image, we give it further embodied details. So she could begin to picture the trees, the path, the surface on which she walks, what time of day it is, where this path is, on and on and on. And as she was expanding, exploring this image, XXX, the image is coming out of itself. Expand, explain, explore. Anyway, as she could work out more and more of the particular details of this image, she noticed that she was changed by the image. She had this sense of relief, this sense that what she really desires, that has been so frustrated for so long, it's actually available to her in a way that maybe she didn't fully trust before. Now, this is an important question. When you can clarify what it is you desire, are you willing to be patient with reality when present circumstances are not immediately forthcoming with your desire? Are you willing to be patient? Because it's going to take the world out here some time to catch up with internal psychic reality. Carl Jung, does give us the idea that psyche creates reality every day. And I really do believe that. Now, it doesn't create reality immediately every day, but it's working. It's working at resolving the discrepancies between external reality and internal psychic reality. Now, one of the keys that we can bring to this to make this process more and more available to us is, again, to contain the experience of frustration, not constrict it, not collapse it, not lash out and discharge that energy, but to contain it. And when we do so, we can then invest that energy, that buildup of our potential. We can invest it into the image itself. And as we do so, the image will reinvest in us. Is there more to say? I'm sure there is. Let me offer a very brief summary of these ideas. Reality is going to frustrate your desires. And frankly, that's a good thing. What that means is that you can level up. You can potentiate yourself when you contain the experience of frustration. That gives you access to more potential energy, which you can then invest in the further specification of your desired reality, the state in which you'd like to experience yourself. And again, there is some scene, some specific, some precisely qualified scene that represents the state of your wish fulfilled. And when reality frustrates you, and you contain the potential energy of frustration, You can then direct your attention to the image of what you desire. And you can invest all of this potential energy of frustration into that image. You can notice more and more of its precisely qualified details. And in doing so, the image will reveal to you more and more of what it asks of you. Now, the cool thing is, what images ask of you, they offer to you as well. What is asked is afforded in a very specific way. It gives you an image, it pictures for you, it gives you a representation of how it would be for you now to be as it requires. If that image asks you to be confident, it shows you an image of you confident. If it asks you to be secure, it shows you what you are like when you are secure. If it asks you to be uninhibited, it shows you what you are like when you are uninhibited. And our images only reveal these things to us when we take active investment in them. And one of our most potent resources for doing so is the frustration we experience in the current circumstances. So, boy, I really am hoping all of this makes sense for you so far. These are ideas that I mentioned are very poorly understood, generally speaking, and that's a shame because when you understand these things and you can actually make use of the experience of frustration, you just have this incredible resource available to you for the investment in and the fulfillment of what you desire in your life. So, this, I submit to you, is how you can begin to harness the experience of frustration to achieve with greater and greater ease what it is you really desire for yourself. Now, if this brings up questions, feel free to drop those in the comments down below. If you have thoughts upon reflection as you finish watching this video, feel free to drop those down below as well. I'd love to hear what this calls forth in your own experience. So anyway, I'll pause the video there. I look forward to speaking with you very soon.